The bilateral relations between the UAE and Saudi Arabia are certainly strained in 2021, particularly when we compare the nature of the relations this year with the nature of relations in 2017, when both sides were announcing this very strategic relationship, where we saw both sides really embarking on the similar vision for the Arab world post-Arab Spring. What underwrote until now this relationship, this special relationship between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, was for one, the ideological element, the ideological synergies, a shared vision for the region, and apart from that, a personal relationship between the two crown princes, one of Mohammed bin Zayed of Abu Dhabi and the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. And the latter, particularly MBZ, was always somewhat the mentor of Mohammed bin Salman. And this sort of relationship worked very well when Mohammed bin Salman was in a state of consolidating his power in Saudi Arabia. Now, obviously, Mohammed bin Salman has matured. He consolidated his power. He's a lot more comfortable in his shoes in comparison to 2017. And that personal relationship between these two crown princes has really taken a hit in many ways. In many ways, both were trying to distance themselves from each other. We've seen MBZ and MBS going different ways when it comes to garnering support in Washington, and unlike in 2016, when Mohammed bin Zayed was really cheering on for Mohammed bin Salman and advocating for him, lobbying for him with the Trump campaign and the then Trump administration. Now, with the Biden administration coming in, both sides have really understood that for them to move forward, they really need to buy credit with that new democratic US administration, and both of them don't fight together to kind of court the Americans, but each of them fight for their own. And both the Saudis and the Emiratis think it might be better to do this themselves, because both of them have outlying and outstanding issues, particular of reputational nature, that would make it necessary for both sides to distance each other when it comes to foreign policy engagements, whether it's in Yemen or when it comes to other issues. Another element that has really put a lot of pressure on this so-called strategic relationship between Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia, in many ways, has been the end of the Gulf crisis, the Qatar crisis that's been going on between 2017 and ended in January of 2021. While MBZ and the UAE really took a lead on building that blockading alliance against Qatar, it was the Saudis who somewhat broke rank and realized pragmatically that it might be now the right time to actually, especially with a new US president, it's the right time to actually reach out to Qatar, bring this ridiculous crisis to an end, and kind of help building more stability and building back some of that stability within the GCC. And Mohammed bin Salman took over that leadership. The Saudis took over that leadership and did this without really consulting the Emiratis. The Emiratis were really pressured into falling in line. They did so reluctantly, knowing that if they didn't, it would really cause a lot of pressure in Washington, because they would be seen as an outlier. So we've seen this entire Al-Ula summit and Al-Ula Accord. It really came about under the leadership of Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudis reaching out to the Qataris, with the UAE really thinking that time might not be ripe to now really break bread with the Qataris. If it was up to the Emiratis, particularly to Abu Dhabi, they would have been able to sustain this current situation for a little bit longer, or at least would have taken a lot longer in kind of gradually phasing out this crisis and somewhat normalizing. That normalization process, which Saudi has really embarked on quite happily, in quite a lot of strategic depth and with a lot of pace, is really not something that made the UAE very happy. And also in addition to what happened in Yemen, where again the Emiratis were kind of leaving the Saudi-led coalition, doing their own thing in the south, very much undermining the Saudi position in Yemen. These are the Qatar crisis, and the way the Saudis dealt with that is another element to that political friction between these two sides. Also, let's not forget how this competition over regional leadership does not only play out in the political or international realm, but it also obviously plays out in the economic realm. The Emiratis and the Saudis are competing for market shares. They're competing not only in the hydrocarbon sector in terms of oil, where we've seen that both of them going head to head when it comes to agreeing on output quotas within OPEC, but it goes beyond that. It means that Saudi Arabia's very, very necessary policy of diversification, building a private sector, means they need to attract foreign capital, investments, and labor, much of which is in the Gulf, situated in Dubai. That means that for Saudi Arabia to grow, to build a private sector, to attract investments and to attract multinationals to come to Saudi Arabia, this will have to come at the expense of Dubai. And that really pits the Saudis against the Emiratis. And in this kind of zero-sum context, it's very difficult to ascertain how both sides will find common ground and potentially a win-win situation. So compromise is very difficult, and the Saudis very much suffering from the pandemic, just as much as Dubai does, as the Saudis will very forcefully, and they continuously do already over the last couple of years, very forcefully pressure multinationals to come to Saudi Arabia. If they want to do business in Saudi Arabia, they're saying Saudi Arabia is the bigger market. We have, in terms of size, we're far bigger than the UAE. We are building the infrastructure. We will invest billions and billions of dollars. So why don't you set up tent and shop in Saudi Arabia rather than the UAE? And that sort of unhealthy competition that we see there is something that will not go away anytime soon, and that will put a lot of pressure on this so-called special relationship between the UAE and Saudi Arabia.